So welcome everyone. It's just about time. Our talk is going to begin in just a moment. My name is Juliana Medeiros, and I'm going to be one of your hosts for this evening. I'm a scientist here at the Holden Arboretum, and I'm going to give you a few technical notes before we introduce our speaker. First of all, just so that you're aware, we're recording this Zoom meeting, and the meeting is being live streamed to YouTube, where it will be permanently archived for public viewing. The audience microphones will be muted for the entire talk, and we also recommend that you turn off your camera during the talk for better viewing of the speaker. We do encourage you to ask questions, and for the talk, questions will be using the chat feature. Our moderator tonight will be Margaret, and they will be monitoring the chat window for your questions. You can submit your questions in the chat at any time during the talk. And then at the end of the talk, Margaret's going to choose a couple of questions from the chat window to ask the speaker. So if you could change to the next slide. All right, so we're going to get started. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Once again, welcome to the Holden Forest and Garden Scientist Lecture Series. Our mission here at Holden Forest and Gardens is to connect people with the wonder, beauty, and value of trees and plants to inspire action for healthy communities. And we're proud to be partnering today with Black Botanists Week to bring you the second installment of this very exciting year-long series entitled Growing Black Roots, the Black Botanical Legacy. This series will cover a broad range of botanical disciplines and delve into the historical legacy of formally trained and self-taught Black botanists. Through this series, we seek to shine a light on the Black roots within botany, to foster a community of Black botanists and demonstrate diversity within this community, and to inspire others who may not have considered botany as a career choice. We want to give a big thank you to the Cleveland Foundation for sponsoring this lecture series. The Cleveland Foundation works to enhance the lives of all residents of Greater Cleveland, now and for generations to come, by working together with donors to build community endowment, addressing needs through grant making, and providing leadership on key community issues. You can learn more at theclevelandfoundation.org. My co-host today will be Ms. Maya Allen, who is one of the founding members of Black Botanist Week and also a graduate student at the University of New Mexico, where she's studying ecology and evolutionary biology of the role of phenotypic plasticity in colonization success. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Allen, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Black Botanist Week and introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Medeiros, for that introduction. We are very excited about this partnership with Holden, and Black Botanist Week was founded just this past summer to promote, encourage, create a space safe for, and find more Black people and POC that love plants. Our speaker tonight is one of the Black Botanist Week organizers. I am proud to introduce Dr. Morgan Halane. Dr. Halane's research has investigated aspects of plant immunity in legumes and in the model plant Arabidopsis. In addition to the molecular biology of citrus greening disease, his work focuses on understanding how plant immune responses are triggered by exposure to pathogenic proteins. And he continued his research on plant immunity at POSTECH Korea Research Fellowship from the National Research Foundation of Korea, eventually bringing his research skills to the biotech industry at Aanika Biosciences. Beyond his research, Dr. Halane's diverse skill set also speaks to his interest in outreach, including a BA in English literature with a thesis focused on the depictions of adaptation in the film When Loosely Based On Becomes New, defining the limits of adaptation in the film Blade Runner and Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Welcome, Dr. Morgan Halane.
Thank you, Maya, so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. Can everyone hear me fine? I know that my audio has been a little bit sketchy recently, so thumbs up if you can hear me fine. think we are good to go. Awesome. So thank you again, everyone, for coming to this talk today. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all of our veterans. And also just give yourself a pat on the back for making your way through this year. It's been a very challenging year in a lot of ways. Pandemic, and then election, and then a bunch of new issues coming up just in society, which I'll touch up on later. So, give yourself a pat on the back for making your way through and navigating it. And you deserve a lot of praise for, making it to November, and hopefully things will start getting normalized, hopefully. So my name is Dr. Maureen Halane. I got my PhD in 2017 and have been doing several different things since then. I've done postdoc, I've done industry, I've done a bit of public service experience also. So tonight I want to give you a kind of an overview on how I've navigated things, and to speak to not only fellow Black biologists and fellow Black scientists, but also to non-Black scientists or people who are interacting with Black scientists, and kind of presenting ways to rethink some things and ways to try to see things from the other perspective and move forward together as a unit. So this is a bit of a non-traditional talk. So I'll attempt to interweave my personal experiences, being Black in society, being a Black American, Black in the United States, also with my professional experiences of being Black in biology, being a Black botanist, molecular biologist. And I believe it's required to interweave both of those things because they're inseparable. You can't separate them. So I want to start with kind of my personal history, which starts in Sedalia, Missouri. So Sedalia was a railroad town founded in 1857 by General George Rapine Smith on native lands in western Missouri, just east of the Kansas border. George R. Smith was a Union slaveholder who migrated from Kentucky to Missouri with my maternal ancestors who were his slaves in 1833. Here is a picture of Sarah Smith Cotton. So originally named Sedville after Sarah Smith Cotton, who was George R. Smith's daughter. The name was later changed to Sedalia. Apparently, people thought it sounded better than Sedville, so they changed it to Sedalia. So Caleb Lindsay was my great-great-great-grandfather and a slave of George R. Smith. So I am a 5th generation removed from slavery. So this is an article from the Sedalia Democrat. It's the local newspaper from October 9th, 1919. And, this is announcing his death. 6 years before his death, he became paralyzed after falling off of a wagon load of hay. He was 73 years old. And, as I mentioned, he came to Sedalia as a slave of the founder of Sedalia, George R. Smith. So Georgetown is a even smaller town outside of Sedalia, which was, also named after, the Smith family. So interestingly, his funeral services were attended by Sarah Cotton, who was the daughter of George Smith. And here's another clipping from the October 10th, 1919 Sedalia Democrat paper. And, it's a tribute to Caleb Lindsay, well-known Negro. And you can see here, some of the things that they were talking about, his parents, who he was born to. I thought it was interesting that they mentioned that his father lived to the age of 104 years old, energetic to the last, sitting in his chair, making his garden within 2 weeks of his death. So that, I read that and that made me really excited. This is kind of a long Black botanical legacy, for my family, from my mom's side. And this is another clipping. Celia Clay, who was my great-great-great grandmother and a slave of Dr. Henry Washington. And I added this clip. I thought that the wording that they used, you can see that it says aged negress of slavery days dead. And, that's just, that's one of the terms that was used back then. Negress, a Black woman was called negress back then. So it's interesting to have that historical artifact that, we can still look to today to see, these terms that Black people were called back then. So yeah, she died at 90 years old, so she lived a long life. She was an interesting character, faithful and honest and highly respected, is what the newspaper article said. She is survived by 7 children and 3 great-grandchildren. So during my research for this talk, I came across this book, Life of George R. Smith, founder of Sedalia, Missouri. This is, I think it's available on Amazon still. So, and it was interesting for me to do my research and kind of hear about my history from, my ancestors' journey from Kentucky to Missouri during slavery. So I'm trying not to use a lot of text during this talk, but I think this is required for these next couple of slides, so bear with me. So this book was written from excerpts written by Sarah Cotton, the daughter of George Smith. So they write, the slaves had intermarried with the neighbors' Negroes and our grandfather. Being humane in his feelings, was unwilling to separate them. So to overcome this difficulty, he had to buy where he could and sell where he must. This was no little task among a number of 30 or 40 people, but finally it accomplished as far as possible, and the caravan set out. The Negroes, men and women, the babies and the gray-haired grandparents, were to follow their master. There were 5 or 6 very old ones, Aunt Creasy, Aunt Kizzy, Uncle Toby, Aunt Rachel, and Uncle Jack, who, as I remember them, were oracles of wisdom, holding direct communication with spirits, wizards, and witches, and who would on occasion deal out some of their mysterious spells to us, listening, wondering children, in the long, quiet evenings that followed our settlement in the new country. Dear old Kentucky memories were to them hallowed things of the beautiful, irrevocable past, and their faltering, trembling voices, their heavy lips and wrinkled faces only made their pathetic stories the more sacred and the more tender to our credulous ears. So that was a recounting of this journey from Kentucky to Missouri when Sarah Cotton was a child at this point, but has these memories of traveling with my slave ancestors. So Sarah Cotton did have anti-slavery views. And she writes, intelligence and slavery cannot exist together. The one enforced wrong of ignorance compels the other, but the homes of the slaveholders, to the superficial looker-on, often seemed happy. The ignorant creatures with no aim in life could have no ambition. The masters were usually humane, and there was often real affection between master and often great kindliness. There were merciful services from each to the other. There was laughter, song, and happiness in the Negro quarters, but it was the happiness of ignorance. It was an edifice founded upon sand, an unnatural condition, and the violation of God's law brings its own retribution. The house was toppling, it had to fall. To the unthinking, it seemed a happy picture, but where was the justice and where the mercy in such an aimless life? The one people with no thought, the other thinking only to keep the former in subjection. Perhaps it was God's plan to elevate the Negro. Who can tell? But the fruit was ripening, the time of the harvest was approaching. So Sedalia's Black legacy. So Sedalia was actually home to a historically Black college, HBCU, George R. Smith College, named after the founder of Sedalia, which lasted from 1894 until it burned down in 1925. And several famous alumna actually came from this HBCU. One of them was Myrtle Craig Mowbray. She was actually the first Black woman to graduate from Michigan State University in 1907, where she received her diploma directly from then President Theodore Roosevelt, who I believe was giving the commencement speech during the 1907 Michigan State graduation. And you may recognize another famous alumnus by this song. So if you can guess in the chat, I'm assuming the chat function is available. If not, then hold it for later. But I'll play a little clip of this song, and then hopefully you can guess both the song and the artist. So I'm going to quickly stop my screen sharing for a second here while I play this. Should be here in a second. Hopefully, if my Wi-Fi is not messed up, which it might be. Okay, I'm going to find a different source quickly. Apologies for the audio troubles. Here we go. Yeah, I think some people have it correct here. I can't see all the chat, but yep, I believe I saw some correct answers there. So pat on the back. Let me go back to my screen sharing here. Oops. Here we go. I think we're all good there. Yep, so that was Scott Joplin, the king of ragtime, famous civilian, and that was the Maple Leaf Rag, one of his famous songs that he made. He also did The Entertainer, which is another famous song. So good job to everyone who got that answer correct. So Sedalia today, it's now has a population of around 20,000 people, of which about 85% are white and 5% are black. So it's very highly majority white community. And so a black upbringing in a white place. So this is something I want to talk about, is kind of some background for my future slides. So my parents met at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is an HBCU founded by Black veterans of the Civil War in 1866. And my mom, Carla, was born in 1962, and then she left Sedalia to attend Lincoln afterwards. And my dad, Ali, was born in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1955, and immigrated to the US in the early 1980s before attending Lincoln. So, also, first generation immigrant also. So this is an interesting story that I wanted to share really quickly. So it's kind of the blind date that led to my parents meeting at Lincoln. So this was in 1984. My mom asked a dorm friend of hers from Somalia, Zainab, to set up a date with my dad. And my dad picked up my mom at the same night to take her to a Chinese restaurant in Jefferson City. That was Hunan Chinese restaurant, which is actually still going strong after all these years in Jefferson City. I don't know if I've been there yet, but they have good reviews. So if you're in Jefferson City, go there. So interestingly, in 2017, Zainab's husband, Farmajo, was elected the president of Somalia. So I have her circled there. So the friend who introduced my mom to my dad is currently the first lady of Somalia, which is kind of, I heard about that in 2017. I was just like, my mind was blown. It was really amazing. So you see them here with soon to be former President Trump with former First Lady Melania Trump, and Farmajo is on the left. So my mom has worked at the USPS, the Postal Service in Sedalia for over 30 years. She retired last month, so want to congratulate her for her retirement after 3 decades of working there. And my dad is a ceramicist who's taught at local elementary schools in Sedalia and also the local community college, which is the State Fair Community College. And neither of my parents are scientists nor received their PhDs, but they both hold a curiosity for the natural world, which I think trickled down to me in some level. So this is a quote that I found from about my father's artwork. So you see some of his ceramics sculptures here in one of the, this is an exhibition from 1994 that he did. And it says, Halane's work is greatly inspired by shapes derived from organic forms. He also draws inspiration from traditional African ceramics. He is influenced by objects that he finds interesting or encounters coincidentally: fossils, seeds, shells, and rocks. Sometimes these shapes have mysterious and inexplicable structures that are bewildering and enigmatic in nature. So I think it's interesting that my dad kind of used nature to inspire his artwork. And as I'll talk about later, I have also kind of tried to merge humanities and science, kind of seeing both sides of the dichotomy. This is a meme that I like. So it's this from one of the Spider-Man movies, and he's Willem Dafoe's character says, I'm something of a scientist myself. And I really like that because it really says that, all of us have, there's a bit of a scientist in everyone. So this is one of my favorite memes. So I wanted to share that. So my first professional application process was at Sedalia Middle School. So this was middle school back in 2003, 2004. And so this was to attend a summer Upward Bound program in Oakland, California. So as a middle school student, somewhere between middle school and high school. So if you don't know about it, Upward Bound is a part of the federal TRIO program, which seeks to help disadvantaged students, particularly rural and economically disadvantaged students. And this is a story that I think all of us have at one point or another, the bad letter of recommendation. So as part of the application process, I asked my 8th grade English teacher to provide a letter of recommendation, which she agreed to do. And I then received a call back from Upward Bound informing me that the letter was negative. So this is kind of scary to get as an 8th grader. You don't want that negative call to come in. And they stated that my teacher had expressed concern that I was too afraid to fail. And I was wondering, I'm like, what does that even mean? Why did she agree to write the letter if it was going to be negative? What is too afraid to fail? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? So then you have all these questions coming in. So, this was an early example of that, but, as we go through life, we come across these instances that happen, different variations of the theme, but, you get these things that come in. It's like too afraid to fail. Like, what does that mean? And then you start questioning yourself. Is too afraid to fail a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Like, so you start having these kind of questions that pop up. So fortunately, admissions could tell that this was a surprising letter to receive for a Black student from a predominantly white middle school, particularly considering the fact the instructor agreed to write a positive reference. So after defending the accusation of being too afraid to fail, I was later accepted to the program. So things worked out, it was fine, but things like that, after someone says to your face that they'll give you something and then you hear from someone else what they wrote without them, saying it, and then it kind of makes you question authority in a lot of ways, makes you question, do you trust those figures to appropriately mentor Black students? So yeah, I learned from a young age that being Black means constantly defending yourself against biases, both conscious and unconscious. So I then went on to Smith Cotton High School, which is the only public school in Sedalia. And if you remember the name Sarah Smith Cotton, that's where my high school was named after. And here's a picture of me in the marching band. And I'm hard to find in this picture. I'm the only Black person there. So I'm pretty easy to spot where I am in there. So Black students in white spaces often feel stress from a culture of fear. So this is a story from high school that sticks with me. It's a conversation I had with a friend who I'm still friends with today, actually. So we were talking during lunch about our parents, and he said, "My dad wouldn't like you very much." And I'm wondering, does he not like people with glasses? Or no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I knew, immediately knew why, because I'm Black. Yeah, he'd give you about a minute before he tried to run you over with his pickup truck. So this is one example of how Black students are raised in a culture of fear. Even though my friend, that's something that his father believed, his friend knew to warn me about his dad. So this is something that I wrote earlier in the summer, at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests. So this thought came to my head. So I said, non-Black scientists often see us and think that our path is easier because we're Black. This not only delegitimizes our scientific contributions, but also dismisses the very real struggles that we face. Reframe your thinking. We are scientists in spite of being Black. And I really like that, this thought came to me one day, and it's still, has stuck with me. So I like this, this idea of reframing our thinking, that Black people have it easier in science, because that is not at all the case. So from high school, I went to University of Missouri for my undergraduate degree, and I was still not a scientist. I was actually studying English literature at the time. And so I did a semester abroad at Lancaster University in England, with a focus on Shakespeare and the Lake Poets. And as Maya mentioned earlier, my capstone was on adaptation from sci-fi into film. So particularly Philip K. Dick's novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was adapted into the famous film Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford, and kind of like, what are the limits of adaptation? How far can you go before it's an original work of art, so to speak? So this is a question that I got in college that I think, if you're Black, you may have also gotten this question. If you're Black, isn't your tuition free? So one friend I spoke to was surprised to hear that I had to work to pay for college, assuming that since I was Black that I went to college for free. This is a misconception, and it says something, about the perception of Black students who attend college. So this is the switch from literature to science. So as I mentioned, I, worked to help pay for my tuition. So as an undergrad, I was in the federal work study program, and I was looking for, positions. And then one place really stood out to me. It was Dr. Walter Gassman's lab, and it was studying plant immunity. It's something that I hadn't really thought about, plants having an immune system. Like people, we get sick, we get the cold, the flu, hopefully not COVID-19 in 2020, but it's something I wasn't thinking about, plants getting sick, like, corn or wheat, etc. But plants actually, there's a little bit of science here, but I'll come back to Blackness in a bit. So if you look outside, most plants are going to be healthy, green, happy. That's because most plants are actually immune to most pathogens. But when you think about, farming and how we're currently growing crops and plants and things, a lot of those are, monoculture. They're of the same genetic background. So if you can see here, you can see some beans that are nice and green. And then right beside those beans are some that are brown and sick and very unhappy. So the green beans are resistant to this particular pathogen, and then the sick beans are susceptible. And so during grad school, I was mainly doing using model systems to study plant disease. So on the left is an Arabidopsis plant, which is, you could say it's like the lab mouse of the plant world, so to speak. And it's this Arabidopsis plant's infected with the bacterium Pseudomonas syringae DC3000. And you can see that it's yellow and very sick and not happy. And on the right is a tomato that's same pathogen, causes symptoms in both species of plants. And I like these images. So on the left is bacteria entering through the stomata. So the stomata are the openings in plants that are primarily gas exchange, but bacteria can also enter through those pores. And this bacterium specifically infects the intercellular spaces, so between the cells of the plant, this apoplastic space, which is typically pretty nutrient poor, but they can manipulate the plant to get their requirements for life. So the plant immune system is kind of like I kind of think of it as like a castle, kind of. So castle has multi layers of defense. There's like a moat. There might be thick walls, a lot of layers of defense. And here's an example of a plant cell from a review from 2010. So also multi-layered. So you have your cell wall. You have these receptors on the outside of the cell. These pattern recognition receptors that can detect features on the pathogen, on the bacterium, for example. So like an invader would have multiple ways to try to access the castle, the bacterium has multiple ways to overcome this defense. So one way are these effector proteins. So they secrete these proteins into the plant cell, which can manipulate the plant cell to do one of or multiple things, suppress the immune response, etc. So these effectors are, evolved to benefit the pathogen. But this is, I would say it's an arms race, is what we call it in our field. So plants evolve these resistance proteins, these NB-LRR proteins on the inside of the cell, you can see here, which in some cases can detect the effector and then trigger an immune response. So here's a cartoon. So if you have an effector that interacts with the R protein that triggers an immune response, you can get this. On the right here, this leaf is crinkled, and that's a cell death response. We call it the hypersensitive response. So it's a sign of an immune reaction. Sometimes the effector can indirectly trigger this. So maybe it interacts with a protein that is guarded by the resistance protein, but you can still get that recognition response, which protects the plant. Here's just a few examples of our protein structures. So you can see some things that are conserved. You have this NBS, which is like a nucleotide binding site. At the tail of the protein, you have these leucine rich repeats, and then at the N-terminal, or sorry, the front end of the protein, you can have kind of different types of domains, maybe a coiled coil domain or TIR domain. So you can see that they're a lot of them have this kind of general structure, but still have some differences depending on the specific R protein. So transitioning to grad school, so as an undergraduate, co-authored a paper where we showed that one effector protein, AVRPS4, interacts with an immune regulator protein, EDS1. And so this motivated me to continue to grad school to find out more about this effector protein, AVRPS4. And as a lot of students go through, they may have just gone through this process, or they will be going through this process. I applied for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship program. So one thing I focused on was focusing on economically disadvantaged students in my hometown of Sedalia, as an outreach / broader impacts project. My result was rejected, sad, sad face. Then I started looking into the reviews. So, I'm not going to go through this whole review, but you can see it's positive, competitive academic record, prior research experience, presentations, broader impacts, have a unique perspective on the challenges faced by underrepresented scientists, several outreach projects during his graduate career, organized a high school outreach program from the ground up aimed at reaching out to rural communities, visited 15 classes, etc. Subcon has a strong proposal, prior research experience, publication, very impressive community outreach project. Thumbs up from this reviewer. Another one, also very positive. Presentations, publications, all the the requisite things. Impressive outreach activities, unique perspective. It's very strong broad impact. And then this review, there's always one review that makes you raise an eyebrow, so to speak. So two strengths: one, in-depth research experience in the Sussman lab, which they didn't even get my mentor's name spelled correctly, so that's a red flag. Author on a publication. Number two, research plan, just as an important problem and is well written. 3 weaknesses, so they automatically list more weaknesses than strengths. One, the applicant has been and will continue to be highly insulated in its training, blah, blah, blah. Taking issue to being in the same lab from undergrad. Number two, undergraduate training was primarily in English. His preparation in biology and other sciences is relatively weak. Even though as part of this, I had, I submitted evidence of the classes that I had taken that were in science. So that was interesting. 3, the relative contributions of the applicant and the PI to the research plan were unclear. I don't even know what that means. Are they claiming that I plagiarized the application? You have no idea what they're thinking at that point. Broader impacts criterion. This was highly problematic. As a minority student, the applicant might serve as a role model to other such students interested in STEM careers. He has participated actively in a wide variety of outreach activities, parentheses, none specifically targeted at minority students. Summary comments. This application has merits, but a number of weaknesses temper my enthusiasm. I love that wording, temper my enthusiasm. So as a minority student, the applicant might serve as a role model. So a different kind of racism. So this is something that I wrote for a blog this past summer, but I'm going to read it in its entire, this snippet. I received this review back in 2014 after applying to the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship program, but its impact has stuck with me since. Growing up in Sedalia, Missouri, a town nearly 90% white and less than 5% Black, I imagined academia would be something better, an environment where my color would never be used against me, where I did not have to ever again hear people driving by in their trucks yelling the N-word at me as I waited on the corner for the bus. How naive. Yes, the visible racism was still there. Cotton balls strewn across the lawn of the university's Black Culture Center. Swastikas etched into the library corrals. I was used to the visible racism. What really stunned me was the invisible racism, the sinister biases that were so commonplace, so traditional, that it was hard to believe that they even existed. I felt and lived through their negative impact, but there was no calling card left behind. No swastika, no Confederate flag. So this brings me to another point. A lot of the pressure to help Black scientists is put on the backs of Black scientists. So this is me doing some outreach at my Smith Cotton High School. So I came back to my old high school, and my outreach toward economically disadvantaged and rural students, a pillar of TRIO Upward Bound, was criticized once my application was submitted. So I am putting this out there to non-Black scientists, non-Black PIs, non-Black mentors, non-Black supervisors. Rethink this belief and try to try to put yourself in our shoes. That's the only way that we're going to move forward with this. So where's Waldo? This is, and I'm sure you've heard of Where's Waldo. So I'm going to show a series of pictures and see if you can figure out where I am in these pictures. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've already seen this one. So what I wanted to emphasize with this is that as Black scientists, we are often the only Black person around. And this is something that if you're not in that group, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is in that group. But I think it's important to understand that we are the Waldo. We are the one person who is in these spaces that we're going through. And it's important to every non-Black person, particularly if you're a mentor, a PI, a supervisor in a position of authority, it's important to know that as a Black person, we oftentimes are the only Black person there. And ask the question, take a step back, what's your experience? How do you feel about being the only Black person here? Do you have any, what are your ways to, help us see things in your shoes? Because, everyone, we're all human, we're all fallible. It's difficult to see things from the other person's perspective, but I think it's very important to try. You have to the bare minimum is at least try to see things from the other person's perspective. And as long as we try, then that gives us a stepping stone to work with to move forward. Which brings me to Black Botanist Week, which Maya introduced earlier. So this was such an amazing experience this past summer. So this was, we got the idea. So Tanisha, you can see here at the upper left there. So she put out the call to get a group of Black people who love plants together. And we kind of had this idea of, kind of inspired by the Black Birders Week, which happened earlier in the summer. And so we, got together, and it was just an amazing week of, every day there was a different theme, and we got on Twitter, we got on Instagram, we got on Facebook. We told our individual stories of being Black in science, and just to have that community of Black botanists together, working together, talking together, being very open with each other. When, it's so many other times we feel, very fragmented. You have, there's one Black botanist here, one Black botanist here. If you look at the country as a kind of the tapestry, but to have all of us together and, put this Black Botanist Week together, it was amazing. And it was very, very positive. We got so much, positive feedback. I think everyone learned a lot. Things are still going strong. We're having Black Botanist Week again next summer, so we're already gearing up for that. I can't speak about it highly enough. It's been really, really amazing. We had even Margaret Atwood, the author, put a tweet out about us. She's like, "Look at Black Botanist Week." It's really amazing what's going on there. So I just want to thank all of these, Tanisha, Knox, Georgia, Brandy, Jade, Natasha, Rupert, Maya, Baranda, Tatiana, Tumalong, for putting this together and keeping it going forward. And, it's going to come back next summer, and we're already super excited about it. And we actually, so the New York members of the Black Botanist Week got to meet up. So on the left is Brandy, and to the right is Georgia and myself. So we got to meet up at Highbridge Park, and we got to do some botanizing in Highbridge Park. And it was just really amazing to spend the day outside and to actually meet in person because, before this, we'd only met on Zoom and everything. So it was like really cool to meet in person and have that local, Black botanist community has been really amazing. So I am running out of time here. So quickly to end off, an observation. So through all the spaces I've been through, not many people look like me. And this is just this is just my story. But speaking to other Black scientists, everyone has, everyone has their story. Everyone has their own story. I've heard some awful things that have happened to some of my Black colleagues. And I won't put their name out there, but one of my Black scientist mentors, I went to their office and I sat down and I said, you're Black, you're successful. Do you have any tips? And then her tip was basically, we have to be better than other scientists. Our quality of work has to be better. We have to put in more effort because the default when people look at us, they don't, there's not narrow authority when you look at, a Black scientist. There's, oh, you got here the easy way, or, oh, you did that, there's, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of things. So I really appreciate that we had an honest talk about that. And she said, that's just the reality, we have to be better. And that's the reality until things change. So what can be done? And I kind of lifted these ideas from my summer, the writing that I was doing over the summer. So number one, recognize that those with the most power to help realize this change are typically non-Black scientists who have been unburdened with the pitfalls wrought by systemic racism. Rather than putting the burden on Black scientists to solve systemic racism in academia, leverage your own platform and privilege to affect change. There are far more of you than there are of us. Number two, realize that Black scientists have not only intense personal pressure to succeed in science, but also the burden of being representative of Black people as a collective. When we make a mistake, take a moment to reflect on the fact that we feel guilty not only on a personal level, but also feel that we are somehow reinforcing the negative stereotypes of Black people in our society and in the profession. And number three, avoid minimizing our concerns, but amplify them. It takes bravery to speak out about microaggressions or instances of bias that we face. If we do speak out about them, understand that the situation is probably even worse than it sounds. We really wish that we didn't have to speak up about these things. So if we do take the time and emotional effort to speak up, then listen and act. Thank you so much. And I think I'm right out of time here.
Thank you, Dr. Halane. What an amazing talk. You've definitely given us a lot to think about today. So I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Margaret, who's got some questions for you. Take it away, Margaret.
Sure. Dr. Halane, before we get to these questions, just a reminder that these lectures will live online and be shared with middle school students, high school students. So with that in mind, we'd like to begin by asking you what inspired you to enter the field of science?
That's a fantastic question. So going back from, elementary school, middle school, I was, it's a common story, but, really into animals. And I remember the Sedalia Library, there was a limit of like 10 books you could check out. So I would always have 10 books of different animals, like whether it's like the species of giraffes or the whatever, like, so I'd always, have the books of animals to read through and everything. But then I remember my grandfather, who's no longer with us, sadly, but he sat me down and he said, this is very shortly before he died, when I was 7 years old. He said, Morgan, there's more to life than animals. And that kind of stuck with me in a way. And so I think it's interesting that I study plants now, after hearing that. That was kind of his last thing he said before he died to me was, there's more to life than animals. So.
Wow, that's really powerful. I'll follow that with, and again, with students in mind, future scientists in mind. What about your work brings you great joy?
That's another great question. So as scientists, we learn that kind of the default is disappointment. Have experiments that fail. Even the best plan has faults, as humans. So what brings me great joy is those rare occasions where you find something, or, even if you're out in nature and you see a rare bird that you had never seen before, or you're doing an experiment and then you do it again and then it works, and you do it again and then it works again. And, just like those rare moments that bring the most joy to me, those rare moments of discovery or seeing something that you hadn't seen before. So kind of, makes it worth all the day-to-day, disappointments that we go through. So.
Wonderful. I'm going to take just a quick moment. We have all sorts of kudos and comments, thanking you for being so open tonight, sharing your experience, your goals, your worries, your thoughts. I think a lot of people are going to be left changed. And I think I can speak for a lot of us, all the microphones are turned off. People would like to listen and learn from you a lot longer and engage with you. So I hope folks don't leave too frustrated. We have more lectures going forward. You touched a little bit on this in your talk, but I know a lot, there are scientists, you mentioned PIs and others, advisors on with us this evening. What's the number one thing that they can do right away to support Black students and other students of color?
That's a great question. I would say in the immediate term, acknowledge us, say that, there's a stigma to talking about race, which, is still going on, even though, I started with the, slavery backstory going back, and, the fact that we're still having this stigma about race, people are afraid to say Black, I think that has to change. So I think just, sitting down and saying, I see you, I know that you're Black, what can I do? What can I tell others to do? Because, no one person's going to change this, it has to be a unified effort going forward. So that's a good question. Again, sitting down and acknowledging, and I see your Blackness. So.
Thank you. So you mentioned the importance of mentor relationships. So is there a mentor relationship, or perhaps there's more than one? Is there one you care to sort of spotlight tonight that has been particularly valuable? And what about that mentorship really helped you succeed?
That's a great question. I've had several mentors, and all of them have, helped me in the past. I mentioned Dr. Walter Gassman. He's such an amazing person, and bringing me into science and getting me, interested in science and everything. And so I could list all of them, but specifically I'll mention Dr. Dawn Nagel. She was my first Black mentor, and to have kind of her perspective on, being Black in science. And, she showed up very late in my career. That was during my second postdoc when she showed up. So to get her perspective and to get her, opinion on, solicit my opinion on being Black in science and everything has been amazing. I can mention there's Dr. Siobhan Brady at UC Davis. I talked to her about this, this weird NSF review, and like she was so supportive and everything. Yeah, a few examples, but I could go on all night.
Certainly. So I'm going to read a few comments. We still have 5 more minutes. Just a lot of comments about this being inspiring and helping all of us to learn who are on the call tonight. From Amy, she says, I really like your comment about seeing something rare in nature that really makes it all worth it. That's what I love too about doing field work, since it is often so physically challenging. Thank you for sharing your whole story. I really, really appreciate it. Jennifer says, thank you for sharing your personal experience. I appreciate you presenting opportunities and suggestions for how non-Black scientists and people in a position of authority can be of better assistance. The story about the NSF review is particularly haunting. I will share it with my colleagues. And then from Jerry, starts with, thank you, Dr. Halane. I was wondering how your background in English Lit melds with your scientific studies.
That's another fantastic question. I would say that it's helped me a lot. Like, I did have the NSF reviewer who thought that was a weakness, but it's helped me so much. Like, so much of science is writing and writing papers and writing reviews and writing. So much of it is writing, and to be able to communicate your research in a way that's accessible to people who know nothing about your research is very important, and it's helped me so much. So it hasn't been a weakness at all.
So this just came through from Malia. She says that she is a Black scientist in the biomedical science program at Kent State University. That's here in the Northeast Ohio area. And she said, it's really nice to know I'm not alone in my experience of being Black in science. Thank you so much for sharing. So with that, Dr. Medeiros has already said in the comments that all of these are going to be shared with you, Dr. Halane, because we can't touch on all of them tonight. Your talk has been so extremely engaging. And with that, I am going to turn this back over to Maya Allen.
Wow, thank you everyone for your wonderful comments. And I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. And especially thank our speaker, Dr. Morgan Halane. Thank you so much for that fantastic talk and for sharing that with us. That was powerful, certainly. So this video will be archived. So if anyone missed it, don't worry. It will be on Holden Forest and Gardens YouTube channel. So you can return to watch it anytime, and feel free to share this with your friends and your colleagues. We have also developed some educational materials to go along with this lecture, which you can find on the Holden Forest and Gardens webpage, and it'll also be linked on the YouTube channel. Just a note for the non-teachers in the audience, you should definitely check out these materials because they also contain links to a variety of videos, articles, and digital photo galleries that you don't want to miss. And we'll also place that in the chat for you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, everyone. This has been amazing. And I'm so sorry I didn't get to all the comments in the chat, ran out of time, but hopefully I can, feel free to email me or send me a tweet or something, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So.
And one last thing before we go, I just want to mention that our next talk coming up on December 9th will be Dr. Nakwanda Mukunga, an associate professor at Stellenbosch University. And she'll be giving a talk entitled Of Plants and People from the Past to the Present. You don't want to miss it, so don't forget to register. Once again, thank you, Dr. Halane. Great talk. There's a lot of questions that you did not get to. People want to know about your career, about your ancestry search. Everybody, he's on Twitter. Check him out, and he can keep answering your questions. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks again,